Hello, in this video we will demonstrate how to configure a flow in a user interface, that is, determine how the user will interact with the interface. First of all, we need to define or understand the process flow in which our interface will manage. Let's use as an example a process for requesting services as described below. In a first step, the person here called requestor creates a record and describes the details of the activity to be performed. Subsequently, this request must be sent to the coordinator, who must plan the start and end date of the activity, as well as choose the technician responsible for carrying out the activity. The coordinator can also return the request to the requester, in case more information is needed to perform the activity. Once the activity is sent to the technician, it will be waiting to be executed. The technician, in turn, will be responsible for carrying out the activity within the planned period. Once the activity is completed, record the results and close the request. Let's now correlate the flow described in our interface. Bearing in mind that this interface was designed for didactic purposes only, that is, to demonstrate how to implement a certain flow in the interface. The requester starts the process by clicking the New button. Some fields must be filled in automatically and only the activity details field will be available for filling, while the others must be blocked. By clicking Save, ask the requester if they want to send the request to the next step. By clicking Yes, the status of the request should be automatically updated to the next step. In this step, only the coordinator should have permission to edit the request. When clicking on the Change button, the fields related to the activity planning must be available for editing, the others must remain blocked. By clicking Save, ask the coordinator if he wants to send the request to the next step. Clicking No asks the coordinator if he wants to send the request back for review by the requester. By clicking Yes, the status of the request should be updated to the previous step. In another situation, when the message asking if the coordinator wants to send the request to the responsible technician and he chooses Yes, the request status should be automatically updated to the next step. In this step, only the chosen technician should have permission to edit the request. When clicking on the Change button, only the Note field must be available for editing, the others must remain blocked. By clicking on Save, ask the technician if he wants to start the activity. By clicking Yes, the status of the request should be updated automatically. Finally, after the technician performs the activity, he must go back and click on the Change button, update the Note field, and, by clicking on the Save button, ask if he wants to end the activity. By clicking Yes, the status of the request should be updated automatically, ending the cycle. Once the activity has been completed, it will no longer be allowed to change the data. Likewise, once the activity is completed, it can no longer be deleted. Here is the proposed interface for this example. The field called Activity Status is a drop-down list and will be used to control the steps of our process. Each item in the list corresponds to one of the steps in the proposed flow. The requester, activities coordinator and technical responsible fields are also drop-down lists. Let's close the interface and open the Design tool. Go to the Design Tools tab and click Screen Design. We can see that the activity status field is a drop-down list, and its values are obtained from the table also called Activity Status. This field was created using the List Creation tool, as we can see. The requester, activities coordinator and technical responsible fields are also of the drop-down list type and are associated with the user table. It is in this table where the system users are registered. Let's log in with the user Anna. When a user logs in, their name is registered, and in this way we can correlate that user with the fields related to those involved, and thus allow, or not that user access certain records. All the actions of the flow that we are going to implement are associated with the click events of the buttons New, Change, Save and Erase. When the user presses one of these buttons, the code associated with them is executed. Let's go back to the Design tool. For this we need to log in with the admin user. It is important to note that events are always associated with a certain tab. Using as an example an interface that contains two tabs, where the first is called Employees and the other Dependents, we can see that the Employees tab contains a script associated with the erase event. The Dependents tab has a script associated with the new event. So, first we must select the tab where we want to add the scripts, and then go to the Button Events Config tab. Going back to our example, select the Screen Config tab. The tab where we are going to add the scripts is already selected, so we can go to the Button Events Config tab. Click the new button, and choose the new event from the list. Save and then click the Script button. Let's now implement the actions that should take place when the user clicks on the new button. The first action we are going to add is field initialization. Click the Expression button. Click New. Let's initialize the activity status field. As this field is of the drop-down list type, the application already shows the list of possible values. Let's initialize it with the first step of our flow, in the case with the applicant. Let's initialize the request date field using the today function. This way, the field will be initialized with the date of the day the user creates the record. Now let's initialize the requestor field. Let's initialize it with the user log function. In this way, this field will be initialized with the user who is logged in the application. Let's assume that the coordinator is always the same person, in our example Mr. Jacob. As the field technical responsible is mandatory, we must initialize it with some value, otherwise the application will not allow saving the data. Let's initialize it with the value to be defined. Now confirm by clicking the Apply and Exit button. We see that an object called Expression has been created. The next action is to release access only to the Activity Details field. In our example, this will be the only field that the applicant must fill. Click on Block Data. Move all fields to the right. These fields will be locked. Now move the Activities Details field to the left. This is the only field the applicant will need to fill in. Click Apply and Exit. Now let's define the sequence in which these actions must be performed when routing. Click Enable Routing. Start the routing by the Start object, then in the Expression object and finally in Block fields. Now click on Disable Routing to disable the routing tool. Now let's save and see how it turned out. Open the interface and click the New button. Note that the fields were initialized as defined. We can also observe that only the Activity Details field is available for editing, the others are blocked. Let's now save the changes. Now let's see what happens when we press the Change button. We can see that, instead of only the Activity Details field being available for editing, all fields were released. This is because we haven't defined any action for the change event yet. The next step then is to create the actions for the change event. Close the interface and return to the project screen. Click the New button and choose the change event from the list. Save and then click the Script button. In the change event, we need to know what phase the request is in, and then check if the logged-in user can access the records, and finally, release only the fields associated with the role that each one is performing within the flow. Click the Decision button. Let's test if the activity status field is equal to with the applicant. Let's test if the logged-in user is different from the requester. If the logged-in user is different from the requester, we should show a message warning the user. Click on Message and fill in a warning message to be presented to the user. After showing the message, we must abort the action preventing the user from editing the records. Click Abort and then Apply and Close. If the logged-in user is the requester, we must only grant access to the Activity Details field. Now let's define the sequence in which these actions must be performed when routing. Click Enable Routing. When the routing is finished, click on Disable Routing. Let's now do the same for the other steps of our process. Let's test if the activity status field is equal to in planning. If yes, only the coordinator can access the records. If the coordinator is different from the logged-in user, we should show a warning message and abort the action. If the coordinator is the logged-in user, we must enable the fields plan start, plan conclusion and technical responsible. Let's do the routing. If the activity status field is equal to waiting for start or in progress, the technical responsible can edit the records. Let's do the routing. If the activity status field is none of the previous states, the request has already been completed. In this case, we should show an avid message to the user and abort the edit. Let's now recap the flowchart. If activity status is equal to with the applicant. If the logged-in user is the requester, then we release access to the corresponding fields, otherwise a warning message will be displayed, and the action will be cancelled. If the activity status is equal to in planning, and the logged-in user is the coordinator, then access to the fields associated with it is released, otherwise a warning message is displayed, and the editing is cancelled. If the activity status is equal to waiting for start, or in progress, then we check if the logged-in user is the technical responsible. If so, access to certain fields is released, otherwise the message of warning, and the action is cancelled. If the activity status is not one of the previous states, it is because the activity has already been completed. In this case, a warning message will be displayed, and the action will be cancelled. Don't forget to click Save to save the changes. Let's now create the save event. When the user clicks the Save button, depending on the status of the request, a query message should be displayed. If the user decides to send the request to the next step, the value of the activity status field must be automatically changed to the next step. Click the New button, and choose the Save event from the list. Save and then click the Script button. The first step is to know which stage the request is in. Let's do this by testing the value of the activity status field. If activity status is equal to with the applicant. If yes, we should show a message to the requester asking if he wants to send the request to the coordinator. Click on the Decision Message button. This object shows a message to the user, and the message screen has two buttons, a button with the description, yes, and another with no. From the user's response, we will know what action to take. Fill in the message field asking if the user wants to send the request to the coordinator. If the answer is yes, we must change the state of the activity status field to in planning. Now let's do the routing. If activity status is equal to in planning. If yes, we must show a message to the coordinator asking if he wants to send the request to the technical responsible. Click on the Decision Message button. Fill in the message field asking if the user wants to send the request to the technical responsible. If the answer is no, we must show a message to the coordinator asking if he wants to send the request back to the requester. Based on the coordinator's response, we must change the status of the activity status field to waiting for start, with the applicant or simply do nothing. Now let's do the routing. If activity status is equal to waiting for start. If so, we must show a message to the technical responsible asking if he wants to change the status of the request to in progress. If the answer is yes, we must change the state of the field activity status to in progress. In addition, we will fill the start date field with the current date. For that, we will use the today function. Now let's do the routing. If activity status is equal to in progress. If so, we must show a message to the technical responsible asking if he wants to finalize the request. If the answer is yes, we must change the state of the activity status field to activity completed. In addition, we will fill in the conclusion date field with the current date. For that, we will use the today function. Now let's do the routing. Now save the changes, and let's test the complete flow. Let's log in as Anna. Mrs. Anna opens the interface, and we create a request. When clicking Save, a message appears asking if the request should be sent to the coordinator. Let's select Yes. At this stage, the requester is no longer allowed to change the data. Let's close the interface and log in as Jacob. Mr. Jacob opens the interface, observes that there is a new request. It checks if there are any issues. In this case, the requester forgot to attach the file containing the necessary information to detail the task. Mr. Jacob then edits the request, but instead of sending it to the technical responsible, he returns the request to the requester. We could have put a field indicating why the coordinator returned the request. But let's imagine that he talked to the requester telling him why he returned the request. We can see that now, Mr. Jacob is no longer allowed to change the data. Let's now log in again as Anna. Mrs. Anna returns to the interface and attaches the missing file. She edits the request and sends it back to the coordinator. Let's log in again as Jacob. Mr. Jacob enters the interface again. Checks that all information has been added. As everything is okay, he edits the request and proceeds with the process. He directs the request to Ms. Mia, plans the start and end date of the task, and finally, upon saving, sends the request to Ms. Mia. Let's log in now with Mia. Ms. Mia enters the interface, edits, and when asked if she wants to start the request, she clicks yes, thus changing the status to in progress. The start date field is filled with the current date. When Ms. Mia completes the tasks described in the request, she goes back and edits the request. Fill in the note field with relevant information, and when asked if you want to finalize the request, when clicking yes, the conclusion date field is filled in with the current date. The request status changes to activity completed ending, so the flow of this process. Once the request has been completed, you are no longer allowed to make any changes. The last step in our process is to add a restriction, so that we are not allowed to delete records whose request has already been completed. Close the interface, log in as an administrator and access the Screen Design screen. Go to the Button Config tab. Click New and select the Erase event. Click Save. Click on Script. If activity status is equal to activity completed. If yes, we should show a message informing you that it is no longer allowed to delete the request as it has already been completed. Then insert the abort object to cancel the action. Now let's do the routing. Save and let's do a test. The application did not allow to delete this record since this request was already completed. The record has been successfully deleted. We've reached the end of this tutorial demonstrating how to add a process flow to an interface without coding, using a flowchart-based technique. We hope you enjoyed. Stay with God, and until the next video. You don't need to be a programmer to do all this. Learn more at smartbuildertool.com.